Welcome to Annunciation Radio's Faith with Reasons, the program that examines what the Church teaches and why. Faith with Reasons.
Well, good afternoon and welcome aboard. Ron Finn and Shayne Stanfield in studio with a wonderful guest today. Can't wait to get to our topic. For those of you that have seen the movie Father Stu, you'll find this particularly interesting because we'll go behind the scenes a little bit. Shayne.
Nice, yeah. I enjoyed the movie. I mean, it was just a great explanation of his conversion, and I hope to learn much more today.
Mm-hmm. And on this holy day of obligation, as we really kind of remember saints that are important to us, and all this cloud of witnesses that we have in heaven.
Oh yeah,
it's such a wonderful day to be really anywhere and to draw these saints close.
Yeah, it's a great day. So if you certainly have a favorite saint, this is a day to celebrate.
Is there a Saint Shayne? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. Maybe I'll fill that. Who knows?
Well, that's our goal.
I'm working towards it.
That's what we're born for, right?
That's right.
That's why we're here, to be saints and to make others around us saints as well, which sometimes is tougher than it seems.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure.
But yes, a wonderful day all around, and we have Father Bart Tolleson in with us today. He's between masses right now on this holy day of obligation. So glad
we're quite
that
fortunate.
he could make us from Helena, Montana. And he's written a book called Was Father Stu, a memoir of my priestly brother and friend, and it's available right now at Ignatius.com. A little bit about Father Bart. He received a bachelor's in communication at Wheaton College and a Ph.D. in philosophy in communication at Regent University, where he entered the Catholic Church in 1994. He also received a Master's of Divinity at University of St. Thomas and was ordained to the Catholic priesthood in 2007. He has served as a parochial vicar, administrator, and pastor for various parishes in the Diocese of Helena, Montana. This inspiring, insightful, and often humorous look at the life of Father Stuart Long, told by his close friend, Father Bart Tolleson. And after their relationship began and almost ended with a practical joke, can't wait to hear about that, the two men were ordained together, and they forged a strong, lasting friendship. As the exuberant, edgy Father Stu confronted a rare degenerative disease, the former brawler and professional boxer used every ounce of his declining strength to fight the good fight for souls. So it's a very fascinating book, and can't wait to get into it. But I want to welcome Father Bart to Faith with Reason. So, Father, thank you for joining us today.
Ron and Shayne, good to be with you today.
And I'll tell you, this book, in the legacy of Father Stu and his moving story, continuing to draw people closer and closer to God, especially in times of suffering, which so many are impacted by. His life inspired, of course, actor Mark Wahlberg to do the production of the film drama Father Stu, in which he played the title role. Father Bart, who was consulted by the makers of the film, provides interesting background for the movie. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. And first of all, in Helena, you've had a lot of snow lately, so winter has officially arrived. Is that right?
Well, winter arrived last week officially with a foot of snow. Yeah.
Wow. Now, your time with Father Stu had to have been, I don't know if you realized the import of it during the time, but the two of you were ordained together. Were you from the same diocese?
Well, we were ordained for the Diocese of Helena. So I was actually a seminarian for the Diocese of Dallas, Texas, and had some family that moved up to Montana and had been visiting Montana for years and really loved it up here. And had kind of, in discernment, as you're going through seminary, had decided to investigate and really think about making Helena my home. It was just great to be up here. And so along the way, I was trying to meet different priests, and I wanted to meet a seminarian for the diocese. And through a mutual friend, I got the name of Father Stuart Long, who was a seminarian at the time for Helena.
So what's it like, the process that you see? You're already studying for the priesthood in Texas, correct?
Right.
And so how does that work when you have you feel a call to move? does it have to be approved by both dioceses and
Yes.
some sort of a formal transfer is made?
Both bishops have to sign off on it, basically.
Okay.
So I know that the bishop in Dallas at the time had a friend actually who was a priest in Helena, and said, he's a great guy, and that really helped kind of allow him to say, well, we hate to lose you, but if your family's moving up there, and it makes sense for you to go ahead and head up to Helena.
That's good. I'm glad they didn't force a swap or something,
Yeah, I don't know what Helena would have traded. That would have been interesting. And maybe Dallas could have gotten Stu. I don't know.
So you get to Helena, and is that when you first met Father Stu?
Well, Stu and I were I got his email address, so we were, back in the day, we were doing emails back and forth, and I got to know him that way. And I was coming up for an official visit to see what the possibilities would be to coming in as a seminarian for the Diocese of Helena. And the bishop at the time was out of town, so it was scheduled for me to meet with the Vicar General of the diocese. And I told Stu I was coming up, and he was not in Helena at the time, but he said, yeah, well, that'll be great. He's a great guy. The Vicar General's a great guy. Have him to take you to lunch at Haps. Well, I thought Haps was like a sandwich shop or something, and Haps is kind of a blue-collar roughneck bar, and Stu had been a bouncer at that bar, and he set me up, basically, and when I asked Monsignor O'Neill if we could go to eat at Haps, he looked at me like I had lost my mind and I was not going to be a suitable candidate for Helena. And then I said, well, this is what Stu Long said we needed to do. And he was like, oh, that guy. Okay, never mind. We're going elsewhere. It's fine. I get it. Stu thought that was so funny. I mean, he just laughed and laughed when I told him about it. I thought, you set me up. And he just thought it was hysterical.
That is a great practical joke. We're going to make sure my buddy he gets on the right side of the vicar right away.
Yeah, I mean, Haps is where a lot of Hellenites go for their first official legal drink. Let's put it that way.
Oh,
good. Yeah, sounds like a real scamp to me.
I think it's interesting that it seems like for both of you to be ordained at the same time, your education must have been very closely aligned.
Well, we were in the same year of seminary. That's it worked out well, and we were both converts to the Catholic faith. Actually, became Catholic on the exact same day. At the time, I was living on the East Coast, and Stu was on the West Coast. And we both had kind of had this kind of meandering journey of discernment going, should we become religious? I had kind of tried the Carmelites, Stu had tried the Franciscans. That didn't really work out, kind of led us back to diocesan priesthood. So he knew what it was like to kind of be on a journey, and I think we connected that way because our faith journeys were in some ways similar. And it was nice having someone, who's in the same class. Now the bishop just left me in the seminary back in Texas. He said it's going to be easier for you just to finish there than try to transfer to where Stu was at Mount Angel in Oregon. And so we kind of kept up, via email and see each other on breaks and things like that.
Well, and that obviously is quite a commitment when you receive that vocational call, and you commit to all that study, and obviously many years involved in it, and not an easy thing. So, I mean, how was that whole process for you, going through seminary and preparing to be ordained a priest? Mixed feelings? How did it go pretty smoothly for you? Was it a natural fit?
I would say I wouldn't use the word smooth. I mean, in the end, it's the exact, absolutely the right place to be because it's where God wants you to be, where He calls you, what He's made your heart for. And so I can't see myself doing anything else. There's peace, but along the way, it's not an easy sort of thing. So, a lot of young men, a lot of guys that are considering priesthood, it's a hard discernment. Do I want to give my life in this way? This kind of unique way of living as a celibate and being at the bishop's disposal. You might be in a place for a long time. You might move around a lot. You just have to trust in God for all of that and receive the grace. And so seminary allows you the chance to kind of discern that and to see if the call is really real. But the other thing I think for Stu and I both was, as converts, you have all these opportunities. I mean, I didn't necessarily have roots here or there. I'd grown up in Texas, but I had on the East Coast, a lot of connections. And then there's religious life, and there's all kinds of wonderful religious orders. And so it's like, where do we go? I mean, so part of the discernment along the way was trying to figure out exactly where God was calling, by the time the journey was over. And for both of us, it was into diocesan priesthood, and for both of us, it was very clearly called to Helena.
Now, I may have missed it previously, but so you were also a convert?
Yes. Stu and I became Catholic on the same day.
Oh, wow. And of course, you found out this later. I mean,
right.
As you were becoming friends with them. So, tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I grew up in a very Christian home, and fairly, it was evangelical, for lack of a better term. Though we went to the Methodist Church,
mm-hmm.
and it was. It was kind of, I wouldn't say very, fully anti-Catholic, but there was a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment. So, I mean, for me, Catholicism was never an option that even crossed my mind. And I had a lot of friends growing up who were what we call them PKs, preacher's kids, mm-hmm. and, children of people who were ministers in this denomination or that denomination. And, one thing that I have observed is, it's a hardship not just for the minister who has a family, but it's a hardship for everyone in the family. And so I kind of said, I wanted to get married. I don't have any idea at all to be a minister. That's not something I want to do. And so I went to Wheaton College, which is outside of Chicago, Illinois. It's kind of a strong Protestant school and really in many ways anti-Catholic, though I think at the heart of it, fundamentally, going to Wheaton set my heart up to become Catholic because, you got about 80 some odd different campus ministries from all these different Protestant denominations, and they're all claiming to be right. And it's like you go to theology classes, and, the theology professors were wonderful, but one says this and another says that, and you're like, well, who's right? I don't know. And so for me, it kind of set up this stage of drifting away from organized religion. And really feeling like I believe in God, but I don't know about religion. I mean, I was beginning to doubt religion in a significant way. And then toward the end of my college career, there was an individual that was a friend of mine who took his life. And at such a young age, it's such a hard thing to for anyone to have to go through something like that. And at that point, I went with some friends to visit an Episcopalian church, and it was very high liturgy, and there was something about it that just struck a chord at the deepest part of my soul. And eventually, when I went on for my PhD, I met this Catholic professor who invited me to Catholic Mass, and again, that chord was struck, and I began to investigate for myself with the claims of the Catholic Church. I didn't really know them well. I knew some generalizations that I had received. And at that point, the Lord began to work in my heart to really say, the questions of your soul, so to speak, are being answered in the Catholic Church. A lot of things you doubted now are being clarified. And I just took to it very quickly because it fed my soul in a way that I'd never been fed before. And I didn't have to jettison, the God that I loved and fell in love with as a kid growing up. I didn't jettison that faith. It just grew. It was enhanced. It was enriched. And so, I still have great love and respect for my friends and acquaintances and different ministers in various Protestant denominations. I have a lot to learn from them still. And it's great to be able, in an ecumenical way, to be able to talk about the Lord. But for me, it's really very clear that God has put into my heart to become Catholic. And, that's the one decision I've really never doubted. I can remember at the point I got to in my life where I said, now I've been Catholic longer than I haven't been. This is a major milestone for me.
So was it a little frightening, or did you just have that sense that this is right? Obviously, this is a slow immersion, and you're learning more and more about the Catholic faith and what the Church teaches and what these myths contrast to. But was it a little bit, you're kind of stepping out on a limb there. Was there any fear involved?
Oh, I think there's always fear involved when you're walking into kind of a new thing. But it was just so much peace and so much enrichment in learning about the lives of the saints, and learning about some of the doctrines and dogmas that the Church holds dear, and it has always held dear to, and how they kind of fed my soul and began to make sense out of some things that just didn't make much sense. But in the same way is not like, but still being able to grow by reading Scripture and other forms of prayer that I had held to since I was a kid, and so it was kind of a both end. It's always scary when God calls us to new territory. There's always like, I've never been here before. I don't know what it's going to be like, and then anticipation or whatever. But along with that, you learn to trust. You learn to trust that the Holy Spirit is guiding and leading, and really, in essence, drawing us all, to God and to life in the Holy Trinity, that beautiful life in the Trinity.
What a great gift. Faith with Reasons here on Annunciation Radio. Our guest, Father Bart Tolleson. And that was Father Stu, a memoir of my priestly brother and friend, a contemporary of Father Stu, which you may have seen the Father Stu movie. So really anxious to kind of hear the difference in personality between the two of you and what formed that friendship bond at the beginning. Maybe you can start with that. Maybe you're starting. Obviously, this started with a practical joke when he tried to send you to a bar with a vicar there as an introduction. He was kind of yanking your chain a little bit, but getting to know him, what was that like in the beginning?
I think because we both were converts and had that journey, we just connected pretty quickly, and we also saw things the same way. I mean, it was pretty clearly. Stu was always very like, let's make this as simple as we can, and let's make it as clear as we can. And the Catholic faith calls us to certain disciplines and certain ways of being that he didn't have much patience for anyone trying to water that down or to try to recreate it or reinvent it. So he was pretty straightforward that way. We both liked to laugh. He had a great sense of humor, told jokes. I was probably more reserved and quiet, more kind of a ponderer, and Stu was more kind of like, the one in front, kind of the leader, vocal, didn't care. Stu had led a rough life growing up. I mean, athletically, he was a football player, a wrestler, was a professional boxer for a while. He had been in all kinds of street fights. He wasn't ever intimidated by anything or anyone, pretty much. And so I really admired that, that fortitude and that courage. I think for me, he probably admired the fact, that I would maybe ponder things a little bit, and sometimes in our friendship, getting him to slow down and just take a beat before he would just decide to run off and, let's do this. I'm going to do that. What do you, and he would ask, what do you think about this? And, that was his way of slowing himself down sometimes when he might have been, had a tendency to be impetuous.
Now, the process as far as, you're, both of you can enter the church, you just said at the same time. It seemed to me, if I recall correctly in the movie, that you got the impression that his call to the priesthood happened relatively quickly, but we're looking at a period of 13 years.
Yes, and see, so Stu's actually call to the priesthood came at his baptism, it was kind of a mystical event, and the movie kind of reorganized the details because it's so hard to tell Stu's story. You almost have to reorganize them a little bit away from the actual way they happened. But what he did with that call was just he didn't want that call. He received the call, but he didn't want it. He fought against it. He was like, "Oh, it'll go away. It's just I don't really believe this." And so he threw himself into trying to get married. He dated a few women. There's one, of course, that was kind of depicted in the film. Mm-hmm. It was that was an amalgamation of several women he dated, but there was one that was very special. He had a great fondness and affection for those women he had dated. But it still gnawed at him. It just gnawed at him. And then for a while, it was like, okay, I'm not going to date anymore. I'm just going to do good Catholic things. He had a good job, and then he quit his job and was working at a Catholic school and coaching and teaching English and I think religion. And it was, so this is good enough, kind of. He wouldn't really take the step. And then it wasn't until he actually, for the first time in his life, heard Father Benedict Groeschel speak out in California in some sort of conference, that those words penetrated his soul. And he was like, I have been, not taking action. I'm going to do it. But Stu, in his own way, it was all hurry up now. And so he quickly sold everything he had, or he abandoned it. His dad, Bill, told me he had to go and clean up Stu's stuff that he left behind. And he got a friend to drive him halfway across the country. Then he got on a bus and arrived in New York City with a duffel bag and showed up at the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal and said, I'm here. I'm ready to go. I was like, wait, who, what? There's a process for this. You don't just kind of show up off the bus. But it was like, why not? This is where I need to be. So
that's awesome.
And you say that he, both of you found out that was not the path that you needed to go. You were more or less being led back to a diocesan priesthood. Were your stories similar? Is that because you did the same thing?
Yeah, I wasn't that impetuous. I actually had planning conversations and maybe I actually lived with the Carmelites in discernment for a while. That's another story, but it was a beautiful thing. I loved it. It was a grace-filled time for me, really coming into a great prayer life and admiring that spirituality. But it was actually a bishop down in Texas that talked to me and said, you really need to be a diocesan priest. I don't think you need to be a religious. And I had so much respect for him, and his words, I think, really spoke to my heart. For Stu, it was the formator for the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal after kind of a few years of basically saying, this is not where you belong. Not with us, but I believe you have a vocation. Go back to your home in Helena. And I know the Bishop Molino, and I'm sure he would be very interested in having you as a seminarian. And for Stu, that happened really quickly. It was a summer of rejection, and then before he knew it, he was enrolled at Mount Angel in the theologate.
Now, you say it was a rejection. Did he really take it negatively? He really wanted...
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah, he part of it early on is he wanted to prove them wrong. He wanted to prove them that he's going to be a good priest. He's going to show them. It was kind of the reaction from it. And eventually, Father Sudano, who was the one that gave him the bad news way back when, got to see Stu a couple years before he died when he was in the nursing home, and had just observed, this is such a changed man from that guy that kind of angrily left, that he's learned all the lessons that God had for him in this life, and there's a powerful humility in him that wasn't there before. It was just really, really a beautiful thing, and for Stu, getting to have that opportunity to meet with Father Glenn a few years before he died was just so good for him, because he realized how much God had done in his own soul.
Wow,
that's wonderful. Now, in your book, That Was Father Stu, it's a fascinating read, and in it, among other things, you've got some hilarious antics that you kind of detail, stories from Father Stu's teenage years onward. Could you share a couple of those for us?
Well, I'll try to share the ones that aren't rated R. So, early on, Stu was he was mischievous. And so here in Helena, it still runs. In the summer times, there's called the Helena Tour Train, an open air kind of train that takes you around town and gives you the history of the town. You see the sights. It's a really great tour. Well, Stu, I think his neighbor had an apple tree, and so what do you do with apples? Well, for Stu, you don't eat them. You chunk them at the tour train. So it was kind of a regular sort of thing of him throwing apples at people, and then he running and hiding. Stu used to cut through the cathedral. It was his first time in a Catholic church. He was trying to go see his grandmother, and it was between where he lived and his grandmother was the cathedral, and instead of going around it, Stu just said he would just go through it. And he would run through, and he would always try to catch the rector's eye, and the rector would start to scream and yell, and Stu would, just kind of laugh and keep right on running. Stu did observe that there was a group of women who were always in there praying the rosary, and he says he was convinced that at some point some woman in that group started praying the rosary for him. Because little did he know then he would become a priest, of Helena at that time in his life. There was another time when he was in high school that he was at a kegger drinking beer, and they were kind of out in this field, and there was this irrigation ditch, and he was in his mother's Bronco, Ford Bronco, and the cops busted it, and Stu and a couple of his buddies just hopped in the Bronco, and he took off, and one of the police cars was chasing him, and Stu ran the Bronco up the kind of the side of this embankment and actually leapt in the Bronco over this irrigation ditch, and the cops had to slam on their brakes, and Stu got all his friends home. He got home. He was hiding in the bedroom, and he said, Bill said he could remember the cops were still kind of circling the road, and someone had reported it was a dark Bronco, a blue or a gray Bronco, and the actual color was orange, and so they just ignored that Bronco in the driveway. Stu was just there. So he got away with it. Stu was kind of proud of that one, I think. So.
Yeah, I'll bet. And this is a book that, obviously, Father Stu is one of those figures that, very exuberant and obviously a lot of negatives to his personality as well as positives. But this book, it really makes you kind of laugh out loud. So there's a lot in there. First of all, I know we're coming up on break here pretty soon, but what possessed you to write this book? Was it did it spring out of your work in the movie?
No, actually, the Mark Wahlberg bought the option to Stu's life in 2015, and then in 2020, Bill Long had told me he didn't think there was going to be a movie. I mean, it had gone under so many iterations, and he had heard nothing, and so we just thought there'd be no movie. And I was afraid we're going to lose Stu's story. So I was like, well, I've got some things. I think let me try to get it down on paper. So that's how it started. Wonderful.
That was Father Stu, a memoir of my priestly brother and friend by Father Bart Tolleson. And we're going to take a little bit of a break, come right back, and delve in deeper here on Faith with Reasons.
Did you know that in the last 12 months, the Christ Child Society of Toledo supplied 2,200 new coats, along with hats and gloves, and over 4,000 books to children in our community? We also provide layouts and education to parents of newborns, tutor and operate school libraries, because nothing is ever too much to do for a child. Are you a woman interested in helping to challenge poverty one child at a time? Contact us through our website at ChristChildSocietyOfToledo.org.
Hello friends, Peter Range here, CEO of Ohio Right to Life, with a critical update for you on voting no on Issue 1 this November. Planned Parenthood and the ACLU are working to pass Issue 1 on November 7th, which would legalize painful abortion up to the moment of birth here in the state of Ohio. It would also eliminate a parent's right to know whether or not their underage child is considering an abortion or even sex change operation. And it would remove basic health and safety standards for women. Time is of the essence, and we need your help. First, please pray with us every day to defeat Issue 1. Second, please visit createdequal.org/Issue 1 to learn how you can phone bank from the comfort of your own home, or knock on doors to spread the truth about the dangers of Issue 1. Third, please consider supporting us so we can finish strong. Visit ohiolife.org to help today. Thank you so much for your support, and vote no on Issue 1. Hello friends, Peter Range here, CEO of Ohio Right to Life with an urgent update for you on voting no on Issue 1 this November 7th. Planned Parenthood and the ACLU are working to pass Issue 1, which would legalize painful abortion up to the moment of birth. It would also eliminate parental notification laws and remove basic health and safety standards for women. Visit createdequal.org/issue 1 to learn how you can help by going door to door and support us at ohiolife.org to help us share the truth about this amendment. And don't forget, vote no on Issue 1.
Now, back to Faith with Reasons here on Annunciation Radio.
Hey, welcome back here. Shayne Stanfield with Ron Finn, and today we're blessed to have Father Bart Tolleson. He is the author of That Was Father Stu, a memoir of my priestly brother and friend. Father Bart received a BA in Communication at Wheaton College and a PhD in Philosophy and Communication at Regent University. That's where he entered the Catholic Church in 1994. Also received a Master of Divinity at University of St. Thomas. He was ordained to the Catholic priesthood in 2007 and served as a parochial vicar, administrator, and pastor for various parishes in the Diocese of Helena, Montana. And that's where he's speaking to us from today. And again, we're covering his work. The book again, That Was Father Stu, a memoir of my priestly brother and friend. And just before the break, we were learning really how this book came about, and at the time there were thoughts of this movie. So maybe we can get you go back and recap that, and then expand upon what was going on.
Sure. So the Mark Wahlberg had bought the option on Stu's story to make it into a film in 2015, but by 2020 there was still no film, no script. Really, and so I had asked Stu's dad, Bill, I said, is there going to be a movie? And he goes, I really don't think so. And I said, what would you think about me trying to write some of my memories about Stu down so we don't lose them? It'd been a while since, it was 6 years since he died. It was starting to get kind of far away. And he said, no, I thought it was a great idea. So I did the first draft, finished it in June of 2020, and I thought, I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to let it sit. And so I kind of put it away and didn't think much about it. And then in 2021, surprisingly, Mark Wahlberg announced that he was going to put Father Stu into production. They had a script that he liked. And so at that point, several of Stu's friends said, oh, you got to get that book back out, and you got to get going on it. So I was able to actually find a really good Catholic editor who lived locally in Helena, and she didn't know Stu, and she read my draft, and she said two things. She says, one, she goes, this story is amazing. You've got to work on this book. You've got to do it. And number two, she said, it needs a lot of work. I was like, well, I know that. So anyway, so we set to work doing that, and part of the end of the book, was kind of crafted based on the film to try to kind of help people know how they changed things in the movie, what was a little different, and what the truth of it was. I think the film is truthful in the sense of it gets all the major beats in Stu's life, and as Bill Lung said, he goes, we both got to the same place in the end, and it's a good movie. They had to do it that way. There's no other way to do it, I don't think. But a lot of people want to know more about his life and really his background. So I go through his background and then talk a lot about his priestly life, because that was really not really touched upon in the film.
And Father, how did you get connected with the makers of the film? You were consulted by the makers of the film to be part of that project. How did that connection happen?
So initially, there were two friends of Stu's out in California. Father Ed Benioff was the one who was Mark Wahlberg's pastor, and he was the one that had pitched the idea to Mark about Stu's life. And initially, Father Ed said that Mark kind of rolled his eyes and says, even my priest is pitching me, not another thing. And then as Mark heard more about Stu, I think he saw a lot of himself in Stu. I thought, this is a really good story. And so he decided he would make the film. And they just couldn't find the right screenwriter. They couldn't get the story right. And Bill had told me, I think at some point in the fall of 2020, he'd gotten a call from a woman named Rosalind Ross. And she just asked a couple of phone calls, asked some questions. They had only really talked to Stu's family and to these guys in California. They were supposed to come here eventually, but no one ever did. And so I think Rosie felt like she could do a really good script from what she had without getting too much information, because you get too much information from too many people, and it's just so hard to try to allocate all of that. So, but Mel Gibson had called Bill and was just trying to get a feel on who Bill Long was, since he was going to be playing him, and also on Stu. And Bill said, you really, really need to talk to Father Bart. And so it was Divine Mercy Sunday, and it was a long day. I had, I think, 3 masses, including a Latin mass that day. And we were having a potluck after a holy hour at the church, and I was sitting there, and my phone rang, and it was from California, and I said, well, that's kind of weird. I don't know. So I answered it, and it was this familiar voice. It was Mel Gibson. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so, anyway, we had a great conversation. He was really good, very, very smart, and shared a lot of his own kind of faith struggles, et cetera, and how they really wanted the film to do justice to Stu's life. And he was very committed to that. He said Rosie was very committed to that. And it wasn't too long thereafter I got a call from Mark Wahlberg, who told me the same thing. And this was right before they were getting ready to put this film into production. And Mark asked me a few things about Stu's mannerisms, about particularly with the disease, what I observed. And one of the things that was so profound for me with Mark is, we were talking on the phone, and he just starts to weep. And I'm like, are you okay? I mean, you don't know what's going on the other end or whatever. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. He goes, I'm just really emotional because my mom passed away last night. And I said, you're going to start this film in 2 days, and your mom just died. I mean, is this what you want to do? And he said, Father Bart, he goes, I just really feel like that my mom's passing is going to help me play Stu, because I'm feeling these emotions right now, and I feel like it's all God's timing for it. And so that scene in the movie where he goes into the chapel, and he kind of crawls up to the altar and he's screaming at God, that was a one-take scene, and according to Mark Wahlberg, that was basically his grief for his mother, that he was thinking about it. So he really, I think, saw this film and Stu's story connected to his mom, and how much he loved her and how important she was for him in terms of all the good things that had happened in his life.
So
powerful. Yeah,
I mean that's just amazing, and you can almost see how he was thinking about this. Correlating the death with that's an inspiring story in itself. I would like to ask you about you mentioned that the obviously the movie really couldn't touch on his priesthood. Can you give us maybe an overview of what you saw from your perspective?
Well, the one thing the film had in it was at the end lines of people waiting to get in to see Stu, and I said there were 2 things that were wrong about that one scene. The first is the lines weren't happening outside; they were happening inside. So you've got these lines, the last year of Stu's life, trying to get in to see Father Stu, and they're weaving around through the doorways of all the other residents. So the poor residents of Big Sky have to maneuver this constant line just to get in and out of their door, and which is was kind of funny. I think Stu was a little unaware of it because he never saw the line.
Yeah.
The other thing was there was no sign-in sheet. The first time that I saw the line, I had been assigned back to Helena, and I usually saw Stu in the evenings, and that was a little easier to connect with him then. But I had to go get him to do something or tell him something during the day, and I said, I'll just drop in really quickly and get the information or do whatever, and then I'll be on my way because I have a full busy schedule. And so I dropped by and I walked around the corner, and there's this line all the way down the hall. I mean, it's just kids and moms and single guys, and I'm like, what? It's the middle of, it's like a Wednesday. I'm like, what's going on? I mean, and someone at the back says, Father, get to the back of the line. You got to wait like everyone else. What? You're kidding me. I mean, so I tried 3 times during the day or during the middle of the week to see Stu, and every time it was a line that I couldn't wait in. And so finally I went to see him late one evening, and he got really mad at me. He goes, "You didn't come to see me. Why did you come to see me?" And I was like, "I did. I came 3 times. And I couldn't get to the line." He goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You're more popular than the Pope right now." He goes, "No way." So that's when Stu had suggested that I come visit him early in the morning because I get up early. And so I would, if I was going to go see Stu, I would just get up, throw on my clerics, and hop in the car and drive over to where he was. And usually there was no line at 5:30 or 6 in the morning. He was asleep in his recliner, and I just go wake him up. And that way we could have time together, uninterrupted time together. And, by then Stu, he didn't sleep much, and he said it was fine. It never bothered him.
And people believed that he had a gift of reading souls like Padre Pio did. Is that part of what caused these lines to form all the time? I mean, he was clearly well-known and sought after, and people came to see him all the time.
I don't think people came to see Stu because of his mystic gifts, though I have no doubt he had them. I mean, he certainly couldn't read everyone's soul. And I have no doubt that at some point the Holy Spirit just inspired him to say something or whatever. But he had a gift of wisdom. Part of that was from his his life he had led before, practical experience. So it was very, a lot of common sense and practicality and a lot of challenging. When Stu challenged you, it was hard to tell him no because he was in a wheelchair, And so I think just the fact that he was a straight talker with them and wouldn't beat around the bush, and that's what made him so popular. And he was very compassionate too. He was very compassionate and very loving with people that got put in his path, particularly that last year. Just really special.
So, would you say that you witnessed these gifts, or you saw something in him that was mystical, or do you not see, or do you not agree with this thing about reading souls like Padre Pio?
Well, sometimes reading souls, the only one that really knows that is the one that's making the confession, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know that Padre Pio necessarily knew. I mean, Stu didn't have any I knew you were at the bar, in 1984 at this or something like that. So it wasn't. He didn't have that gift. But I think just the Holy Spirit inspiring him to say the right thing at the right time that really cut right to the heart of the matter. Yeah. Whether it was in confession or in a counseling session, Stu could do that, and I saw him do that, and it was, it just seemed very natural, and he never claimed, kind of some supernatural inspiration other than the grace that all priests ask the Lord for. The thing about Stu is he had gotten himself and his own pride out of the way so that God could work through him. And once any of us can do that, we can be very surprised about how God can work through us and in us, whether you're a priest or not. Sure. Just get yourself out of the way, and God will take over, and amazing things will happen that probably in some ways will seem supernatural or mystical. Mm-hmm.
Now, were these lines then? There was a mixture of probably confession and counseling. The people were visiting him for these reasons.
Yes, and sometimes there were people there who were very devout Catholics, and sometimes there were people there who had no religion at all. They just wanted to talk to this guy who they heard about, a priest in a wheelchair who was a really good person to talk to. Wow. So well, I'll go over and get in that line because I have something bothering me. I want to talk to him about it.
Sure.
And I could see how people could be attracted to someone who they can relate to on a human level and draw closer to God at the same time. So, yeah, I can see how that would draw a lot of souls to him and give him plenty of opportunity to listen and respond.
Yeah. The thing is that Stu was, when he first got to Big Sky, he was kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do. The first time I saw him, I walked right in, and he's like playing a video game on his phone. But that changed once people figured out who this guy was and what he was able to do. It was really something. He also loved the residents, his neighbors there at Big Sky, and he sometimes would just say, I'm done for the day, and he would go out and visit the residents in their rooms. There were a few times he had this one resident who also had an electric wheelchair. They would have these wheelchair duels. And I had heard about these things, so the first time I witnessed it, it was kind of scary because all of a sudden I see the lines scattering and I see some of the residents running into the room. Some of them are up against the wall. And like when the people cleared, I see at one end of the hall, there's Stu, and he's kind of clicking his little thing, making sound. And then there's another guy in a wheelchair at the other end of the hall, and he's doing the same thing with his chair, and it's like two bulls getting ready to charge each other. And I'm like, what is going to happen? And they put it into full blast, and they slam into each other full speed. And my first thought is they're going to break each other's legs. They're going to, someone's going to crack their head open. And the goal was to try to knock the other guy out of his chair. And I was like, I said, Stu, that was really dangerous. And I know that, Big Sky probably doesn't want you doing that. And he goes, oh, it's harmless. We're just having some fun. I'm like, all right,
Wow.
Now, I don't recall how much time, so you're both ordained in 2007. How much time transpired before he was diagnosed, and how long was it that, did his health degenerate rather quickly? Or was it a long, drawn-out process where obviously he can continue to serve as a priest?
So he was diagnosed in his last year of seminary, definitively in 2007. So in January of 2007, he got the definitive diagnosis. This is inclusion body myositis, not something else. And he also did treatments, different kinds of treatments, mainly infusions at different points in his life, to try to slow it down. And at times it really did slow it down. What they expected, because he was so young when he got, usually this is an illness that hits people 20 years older. And because of that, I think, they were able to get 2 or 3 extra years out of Stu's life. So really, maybe they were giving him a year before he would need full-time care. It ended up being more like 3 years.
Wow.
And so, that was a gift. So it was a slow deterioration. Now, when I was assigned outside of Helena, coming back and seeing him, you could start to see how much it was, like when you saw him regularly, it goes so slowly you don't notice it as much.
Mm-hmm.
But I could hear it in his voice. I could see it even in the weakness of his shoulders, the weakness of his head muscles. His speech got a little more slurred because of even weakness of being able to speak, and he wasn't able to chew as well, and he had to go slower, and these things that just kind of set in.
So he was actually not admitted to Big Sky. You say about 3 years?
It was the last 4 years of his life he spent in Big Sky. So he died in 2014.
Okay.
And I think it was 2011 or 2010. I don't know right off the top of my head when he was admitted. When they said, okay, that's it. No more, you got to be in a care facility.
So
that's the same time he went into the wheelchair. He was trying to use a walker and some crutches for a while. I mean, he fell a lot doing that, and eventually they said enough because he kind of hurt himself, and they said, you got to get in a wheelchair.
So he's really trying to maximize his time as a parish priest.
He did. I mean, he absolutely made the most of everything he could.
Wonderful. Now, how did the two of you influence each other as far as your growth in spirituality and holiness? I mean, obviously, you did so in your friendship, but what kind of growth took place between the two of you after you were ordained?
Well, I think Stu was a friend and he was a priest, and he was also very loyal, and so it was someone that knew me and knew my weaknesses and knew my strengths, and he called me on when I was being lazy or when I wasn't handling things well. He'd say, you're not doing a good job of that, or you need to pray more, or, you need to fast more, or whatever it was he decided that I needed. And he was usually right. I mean, he cared. And so his advice wasn't coming from just trying to be tough. It was because he really cared that I was as good as a priest as I could be.
Yeah.
On my side, for me, I mean, sometimes I would just be like, Stu, you got to slow down. I mean, that's not, the common sense of things. But I think also for me, and there was times I felt really inspired by the Holy Spirit. There were times I would go in and Stu would say, make sure the door's closed. We got to talk about something really important. I was like, oh boy. And a lot of those conversations were just like, I'm going to give up. I'm going to stop celebrating Mass. I'm going to stop. I'm getting so tired. I can't do this. I can't do that. And it was this kind of slow progression. We had this conversation 3 or 4 times over the course of his life. And each time, I was really tough on him. I just said, you can't. And I said, what's the problem? Let's figure it out. If we have to adjust what you do, let's make it happen. People will help you, but you have to keep going because it's powerful. And he didn't quit. I mean, as much as he was tempted, and I think he told some other people from time to time, he was ready to quit. He never did. And I told him, I said, when it's time, I'll let you know. When it's time, I'll let you know. And the last week of his life is when I let him know. And he knew what I was saying to him. So,
wow. Yeah, that's a very special relationship. Again, our guest, Father Bart Tolleson. That Was Father Stu is the name of the book, and it's available at Ignatius.com. And when you think about it, he's consulting on the movie. He's getting calls from Mel Gibson. He's getting calls from Mark Wahlberg. And I would imagine with Mark, I can see how he can identify with Father Stu because he did have a rocky life, early on. He was pretty rambunctious himself. So I can see why he would be inspired by such a work. And to bring this movie to fruition to inspire others as well, it had to have been wonderful to be a part of that process and get the story told. Like you say, you have to, in a movie, you have to edit certain things and present things a little differently. But all in all, to have your input in the production of this movie and to be working with these people that are all telling his story the most faithful way they can had to have been quite a gift for you. And how did that feel when you're watching that in the movie theater?
It's a little surreal. I mean, the first time that Wahlberg showed me a preview of the film, I just started laughing because I had heard Stu tell me all these stories, but to see them like when he was in Hollywood and to see them Hollywood make the story of Stu in Hollywood, I mean, I was just laughing. Plus, I thought Rosie she had some great lines, and she's a really, really clever and talented. And so I laughed almost at the whole preview. And Mark, I think, was a little concerned initially because I think he thought, there's nothing he's taking it seriously. We've messed this up. And I said, no, this is really funny.
I'm not making a comedy here.
It reminds me of Stu, and it's fun to see these things being depicted. It's funny for me because when Stu told me, I would laugh, and now you're telling the world, and I think it's still funny the way you put it together. And so I said, "Don't worry, I think you're going to be fine, Mark."
So I recall there's a scene, a bar scene, that you're led to believe that he is approached by Jesus, if I'm recalling that correctly.
That's right, and that actually didn't happen. The thing that Rosie was trying to do is Stu had a couple of mystical experiences, one at his baptism. He had another one at Lourdes, and then another one in Paris where he actually encountered St. Joan of Arc. But just for me to say that, it's like, but that's kind of a crazy story. Well, how do you put that into a cinematic moment? Mm-hmm. I mean, it would just be so often left field, it seems like. So what Rosie did, she said he had a mystic experience. So there are 2 times I want to have kind of this mystic participation. And one is in this bar, where he had been a bouncer and he's in there drinking, and that would be something Stu would have been doing. Mm-hmm. And we'll just have Jesus show up because people can identify with that. That's very clear for people. That's a connection.
Yeah.
So that there was mystic moments. She just decided to do it that way. And then the Blessed Mother. Stu never saw the Blessed Mother. He had certainly had a profound mystical encounter with her in Lourdes. But she appeared to him at the automobile accident. Well, when Stu had the motorcycle accident, he did have an out-of-body experience that was kind of called him back into life, and he knew, his life would serve a greater purpose. And to kind of explain that, I think Rosie said, let's put the Blessed Mother here. And that made sense to me because it flowed really well.
I do recall the accident, the motorcycle accident, and you're led to believe that was somewhat miraculous. That he shouldn't have survived that.
No. In fact, Bill, when he got word, he went up to the hospital right away, and he kind of bypassed the ER desk and was going back to where they were treating patients, and there were all these curtains pulled, and he said that there were doctors working on people or whatever, and he got to one of the last ones, pulled the curtain, and there's Stu all bloody, just laying there by himself, and no one's treating him. I mean, and the nurse's words were, "We just thought he was going to die, and we're just going to let him die in peace." And then it wasn't too long after Bill got there that his girlfriend at the time showed up, and she started crying, and when she started talking and crying, Stu all of a sudden came out of it. And Bill said that the nurse came around the corner and said, "Well, maybe you're going to live after all. We better start doing something for you." So, yeah, it was really amazing. So Stu was out of the hospital after a couple of weeks and into rehab, and it was so rapid, considering he had all these broken bones and, concussion and, all these other kind of things, and really had an out-of-body experience. Probably had died and had come back. He kind of didn't want to talk about it. I think there was something that kind of scared him about it, and he held sacred about it. Mm-hmm. He did admit to it to me once that it happened, but he didn't want to go into too many details. And I think it was also his way of staying humble, because he wanted to stay really in the moment when he was living.
Mm-hmm. So what was his trip to Lourdes? Was he studying for the priesthood at that time and took a pilgrimage, or how did he was
finished with seminary, and there was a buddy of his who had just been ordained to the priesthood, who's a priest in Phoenix, Father Killian McCaffrey. Mm-hmm. Father Killian said, "Well, we're going to go to Lourdes. Once you come with us, you could probably use it," because Stu the seminary had said, "We're not going to recommend you for priesthood." Bishop Thomas had said, I'm going to sort this out and figure it out. And so Stu went to Lourdes. And when that opportunity came up, Stu thought that was God's way of saying, I'm going to receive a physical healing. And he thought for sure it would happen. And when he got to Lourdes and he went into the baths and came out, he wasn't healed. He was devastated. And it wasn't until he went back in the baths that he received an interior healing from Our Lady helped him to know he could carry the disease for his whole priesthood. Wow. And that he could be a priest in a wheelchair, and this was going to happen. So,
what an inspiring story, and obviously, to a large degree, it picks up where the movie leaves off. So, if you haven't seen the movie and you haven't read the book, well, you got a busy weekend ahead of you.
Absolutely.
That's right. Well, Father Bart Tolleson, thank you so much for doing this work and for sharing this with us here on Faith with Reasons on Annunciation Radio. Again, the book, That Was Father Stu, a memoir of my priestly brother and friend by Father Bart Tolleson on Ignatius.com.